Afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Today we're going to be talking through the new free MidRise Wood Construction Frame Analysis tool built by Nezo in collaboration with the MidRise Wood Construction Programme. On the call today, you've got the Nezo team here, both myself and Owen, and we've also got Robert Finch from the MidRise Wood Construction Programme. We are recording this. It'll be sent around to everybody afterwards. A quick rundown on this webinar. We will start with Robert, and he's going to share a few words around the MidRise Wood Construction Programme. We'll then jump in and give a short overview of what the tool actually does. After that, I'll be handing it over to Owen, who'll walk you through the installation process, the setup process, the registration of an account, and then he'll jump in and do a live demonstration on the MidRise Wood Construction projects. We'll then wrap it up with a question and answer session. There's a chat button somewhere on your screen. I think it might look a little bit different from you guys as it does from us. You can just pop your questions in there and we'll be more than happy to answer them at the end. There is also a live question opportunity. Haven't quite used that functionality yet, but you'll see it down the bottom of your screen. If you do want to ask something live, have your camera turned on, your mic turned on, just press that button. We'll get a notification on our side that you want to join the conversation. Otherwise, just pop your question into the chat and we'll get to them. Rob, I'll leave you have your words.
Thanks very much, Barry. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. Hopefully you will get something out of this session and may be motivated to actually try the tool and use it if you haven't already. I'll only speak just for a couple of minutes so that we can get on with the real objective of the webinar. But just for those who may not know, MidRise Wood Construction is a partnership program funded on essentially a 50-50 basis between Red Stag Timberlab and MPI. And the entire program with its extension, which was done due to the COVID period, will have run about 7.5 years when it comes to its conclusion on the 30th of June this year. So the program's almost complete, almost wrapped up. But in essence, its objective has been, in some ways, quite similar to the objective that Timber Unlimited had a few years ago, which was to find barriers and do something, try and address them where we could, to more wood or timber being used in the built environment, and in the case of MidRise, particularly in multi-storey structures and long span structures, industrial prototypes and so on. So the key things through the program have been to develop a range of case studies, a range of demonstration buildings, tours, and so on. In addition to that, development of a number of tools. And this is probably the best example of the tool that MidRise has been involved in underpinning and supporting to have developed. So we held hands with Nezo, which was previously, perhaps some if not all of you will know, was VQuest, but is now Nezo. And supported Barry and Owen and the team to, or supported, underpinned the development of this tool, which you're going to witness in a few minutes. And because of that input from us, the tool is from MidRise. The tool is genuinely free to access and free to use, and it's another one within the entire portfolio of the Nezo offering. So it sits right in that target of trying to help lower the barriers and encourage others to think very early on about timber as a distinct and real option, or timber hybrid with steel or concrete, since they are incredibly good options. So it's not a gimmick, it's absolutely real. And the reason you are able to access it on a free basis is because of the underpinning and support that MidRise has provided to the team to develop this version. So it's real. So look, I guess the last thing I would say, for those of you who may have colleagues and friends and others in the industry who may not yet know about it, I'd just encourage you to, after today, to pass the message on and get others in the know that the tool does exist, and hopefully all of you will find it a great help, particularly at that early stage concept and prototyping stage in building consideration with your clients. So I'll stop right there. Thanks, Barry.
Thanks, Robert. Just to reiterate what Rob said, yeah, we are real. This tool is real and it is free. You will be asked at some point to put in your credit card details, but we promise you that there's absolutely nothing charged, and it is all securely kept as well on a third-party secure website. The reason for that is that we need to trigger an action for Nezo to work. At its core, it's built on the Nezo platform. So if you've used the wider Nezo platform before, or you've seen any of our content online, you'll know what it actually does. It does data analytics, those early decision-making processes are all covered off within the full Nezo app, so that you also get that within this free version. The difference between the overall Nezo platform and what this is that it's concentrated down to core structures, foundations, roof and envelope. It's for designers. It does plug straight into Revit, ArchiCAD and SketchUp, and it lets you quickly understand that early design stage performance. So your carbon performance, A1 to A3, it'll also give you cost insight and weight performance for what you've actually designed. But more importantly, what it does is it lets you compare options. So you get to see timber versus concrete, hybrid versus traditional, and all without actually having to fully redesign your building again to check that. Very quick process. For the PMs and the quantity surveyors that are in the room, and we do have a solution for you guys as well that are not using design software, you can use this independently. So we've built a library of the buildings that were on the MidRise Wood Construction Programme. And within there, you're going to see the cost performance, carbon performance, and weight performance of the frames of those structures. They're fully analysed as well so that you can see how they actually performed against the alternatives. So where we've got mass timber frames and floors, you can see the alternatives if they were steel and concrete, or even hybrids in some of the options, in some of the projects. That's all delivered as a benchmark, but you also get to dig right down into the detail of it. So you can drill down beyond the carbon per square metre, the cost per square metre, and actually start looking at the individual elements and materials of those buildings and understand what's actually driving the comparison between the different methodologies and where the actual impacts were. The tool is free, as Robert said. It has been funded by the MidRise Wood Construction Programme. So if you've ever really wanted to test this stuff quickly, this is the tool that's going to help you do it. And you've got this for the next 2 years to actually run with. Very shortly, I'm going to hand it over to Owen, and he's going to run through that installation process, the registration process, and the demo of the tool itself on a MidRise project. But before that, I do want to take an opportunity to thank the MidRise Wood Construction Programme and thank Robert. They've backed us since 2020, long before we ever had anything that actually showed them they were on board with what we were doing, because they could see the impact it was going to have, not just for the wood construction process or wood construction market, but also for decarbonisation and better outcomes for the industry as a whole. Without the MidRise Wood Construction Programme, I can honestly say that I don't think Nezo would actually exist. So we've a huge debt of gratitude to Robert and to his team at the MidRise Wood Construction Programme. Owen, that's your cue. I'll hand it over to you if you want to jump in and start going through the installation process.
Cool. Thanks, Barry. Hello, everyone. Yes, so as Barry mentioned, today I will be taking you guys through a demonstration. So that's going to be very much to show you around the application, to show you what's in there, and a little bit of introduction into workflow as well. But first, there is the technical side. So for anyone not using design software, the quantity surveyors, the developers, I will keep this brief. It is more for the CAD users, or architects and engineers, but I do need to run through that process. There is an overlap because you guys do need to create an account as well. So we're going to actually hit on that first. So where we start off the journey is going to be over on the Nezo website. So just app.nezo, or Nezo, yeah, sorry, wrong one, nezoapp.com. When you land on that page, you will of course come to...
Owen, are you meant to be sharing a screen?
Yes, I am. Too used to having it up before I begin. So cool, you missed nothing. So we're over here on the website. There's a website, and the first place you want to navigate to is the resources tab, and you'll get that from the top ribbon here. And we'll drop down. Now you can check in on the news there, of course, see all the ongoings on with us at the moment, but we'll drop down to the downloads and tutorials. And of course, where you begin is to download your CAD application. For those non-CAD users, just skip up here and you can actually go to register an account. So you can register an account from your browser, from your Microsoft Edge, from your Google Chrome. For the CAD users, you probably will prefer to do this inside the application. That part is exactly the same. So we'll hit on that next. So Revit, ArchiCAD, and SketchUp. You simply click the download for the version of that CAD application you need, pop in your email address and your name and download, and that will just be an instant download that will pop into your downloads folder on your PC, on your Mac. Okay, so for Revit users, the installation process is going to be the easiest for you. Simply go to your downloads folder. You will see that the Nezo file is now located there. And you're just going to double click on that, and that's just going to open an installation wizard. Just click through the few different windows that appeared there. It's pretty automated, and within about 30 seconds, Nezo will be installed on Revit for you. I'm just going to cancel that. Yeah, we'll finish. Cool. For SketchUp, it's the same. It's going to download an installer. It's going to go into your downloads folder and simply go to your extension manager and import that extension, and you'll see the extension is going to pop up here. Nezo will be available to use as a tool inside of SketchUp. ArchiCAD users there are slightly few more steps for you guys. It still should only take a few minutes to complete. So I will just talk you through that. We do have videos. So there's resources here. We have tutorials here that will show you that step by step. But just to briefly hit on it now, click download. Again, it's going to go into your downloads folder. The difference here is you can't just double click and run the installer. We're actually going to get that file and put it in the ArchiCAD folder that is already on your machine, on your PC, on your Mac, because of course you have that CAD application installed. That particular folder is what we see here. So in this case, I'm on a Windows. We're in Program Files. We're in the Graphisoft folder. We're in our version of ArchiCAD. In here, we'll see a folder called Add-ons and a folder called Standard. That's going to take that out of the whole process. Just going down through those folders, that takes the longest amount of time. It takes about 1 or 2 minutes. From there, we just need to drag that Nezo file and drop it in here. We should already see that. Here we go. So that's all I did. I just dropped the Nezo application into this folder. And the next time I open up ArchiCAD, what I will actually see is across the top ribbon here, we have the Nezo application in the top ribbon. So that's as hard as it is. For Mac users, I just want to worthwhile noting this one comment down. It's not always the case, but from time to time, due to whatever configuration you might have on your machine, there can be a block to using the app. All you need to do is go to System Settings, Privacy and Security, and then just allow Nezo access. And that's it. And everything will work from there. If there's any roadblock that you hit, it will be that one. And again, it takes about 20 seconds to resolve, and you'll be up and running. From there, you'll be able to open up the application and upload your files, map your materials, which I'll run through in a moment, and you are away. But of course, first, we do need to look at the sign-in process. So that is the installation process covered. The next is, how do you set up an account? Of course, once you open up the application inside your CAD software, or you go and register here, which will run now. So this window here is on browser. For you QSs, developers, this is exactly the same window you will see when you first open up the CAD application inside of Revit, inside of ArchiCAD. So you just pop in your name, pop in your email address, put in a password, agree to terms and services, and sign up. Now, you might actually be first landed with the sign in window. Of course, you may not have an account yet, so just toggle that over from the bottom here to sign up, which I'm on now. So once I sign up, we have created a Nezo account. Okay, so this is before we've added any kind of subscription. Just going to enter some of the details there as per the prompts. And we'll just save those. Cool. So we don't have a subscription added because this is the same sign-up pathway, whether you're going for Nezo Pro, Nezo Lite, or this free MidRise tool. The application is the same. In every instance, we just change the amount of data that's available. So you need to add that MidRise free plan now to your account to get access to the tool. So also you'll be brought straight to the accounts page. You'll see the subscription options here. And of course, here in the green, we have the MidRise free. Can't miss it. Just choose that. Okay, there's lots of instructions here about going and getting your promo code. So you just need to register with MidRise with the program and the email addresses they've already provided. They'll send you back the promo code, and we're going to use that in the checkout to get this product that's worth $2,000 a year to you for absolute free. There's a few extra instructions, and we're able to actually see, just to really emphasize, make sure you enter the MidRise coupon code in the checkout to make that dollar value down to zero, because this of course is paid for by MidRise for you. So cool, we'll go to choose plan, and we're going to, of course, we're limited to only 1 seat per person or per sign up. And cool, we'll proceed to checkout. And this is just your typical online shopping checkout portal. This is managed by Paddle, who's our payment provider based in the UK. and enter email address. On the next window, it's going to ask for credit card details. So we'll just go along to that step just for now, and we will click to continue. And from here, we are just going to click add discount. You're going to pop your promo code in here. You're going to add your credit card details. Of course, you're already going to see that promo code has been applied and bring the account value down to zero, not the value, but the price to you is $0. And then you subscribe, and that will instantly spin around and you will have full access then to the MidRise tool. So this is what you are going to see. Cool. That is the sign up process. That is the installation part done. Right now, you have full access at this point. Of course, guys, this webinar is being recorded. So along with the tutorials, you'll have a copy of this to maybe rewatch some of those steps if I have moved along any too fast at all. So look, I'm going to introduce a little bit of familiarity around how the tool looks before I show you a bit of the workflow. So we, of course, are going to create projects. With the MidRise free tool, you have one project, basically upload a building, work on that, run your analysis, and at any time then you can just clear that project and load in another one in its place and keep using it on multiple projects, but you just don't have the flexibility to have a whole library of projects at one time saved. Materials and product inspector, these two go hand in hand, and they're probably where I'm going to jump into first, so I'll come back to those. Here, of course, is our video tutorials and benchmark library. That's not built into this part of the app just yet, but you guys are going to have. So when you sign in, up here in the top, you're going to see your account name. Personal account is the default, but then you'll change that to your own business or your own name. You're going to be able to toggle over to the MidRise account to view the projects we've loaded in there. So we do have a benchmark library function available for MidRise. Okay, I'm going to talk about the materials and the data. So the carbon emissions factors that are currently in the tool is a mixture of EPDs and emissions factors that we've added, building upon the old brand CO2 Instruct database that we're now updating and upgrading as well. So any of those updates and upgrades you get access to here in the free tool. So you can actually view, no, it's gone to sleep. We'll just run that again. You can actually view and inspect and explore all of the material product emission factors that are in the database from here in the product inspector. And that will include everything that is currently in that database. So we can look at concrete items. We can even compare different products side by side in here as well. We're thinking more about specification at the moment rather than full building analysis, all categories. So we can play around in here. This is fantastic. So kind of the key things that Nezo does is it makes data accessible, it makes it usable, and it makes it fast. So, and this is what's going to ultimately result in a more efficient, more sustainable, and a more cost-effective construction industry. So we make it accessible. We bring it here to where you are. Great resource for you QSs and developers. Bring this up instantly on browser. But for your engineers, your architects, you're getting all this while you're in Revit, while you're in ArchiCAD. You don't need to go to other resources. You don't need to open up large EPD PDFs that are 100 pages long and find that one table with that one row of information you actually need. It's right here where you are. So it's accessible here. We also make it accessible in the materials library. You just need to jump to the MidRise account. Okay, so the difference here is the material library is where we've made it even more usable. So again, here are all those products. Now they're listed here, which is a little bit different because we're going to use these on our buildings. Now, what we've also done is when you think about those products, we have individual carbon emissions data for reinforced steel and for different varieties of concrete mixes. But ultimately, you're not going to model everything. Again, thinking about the architect and structural engineer workflow. Or you might have a timber infill flooring system. So you're not always going to model every precast beam, every piece of timber for the permanent formwork, for the concrete, for the rebar. So you can take shortcuts. So not only do we have these thousands of emission factors for products that you can use, we've actually, for the MidRise tool, built these MidRise assemblies. So these are going to be combination materials or systems. So we're going to see things like those structural wall systems and floor systems where we've brought together multiple EPDs and made a meter square or a meter cubed material that you can apply to that. So for instance, we can go to an upper floor and we could choose this option here, which is a cross-laminated timber floor, includes a panel acoustic floor. So you don't need to try, when you think of a floating floor, there's insulation, there's timber battens, there's rubber cradles, there's strand board flooring. You don't want to have to model all of that and quantify each of those individually to map them to those individual product emission factors. We've built up what the average quantity of each of those materials would be on average per square meter. So you can use this meter squared material as a much faster way. The QSs will recognize this as cost planning rates. And of course, we've brought that into the material specification world to now work in CAD applications for designers. So we have a host of those. We go through foundation beams, isolated base foundations, through to structural steel, structural LVL, structural glulam, minor steel beams and columns like PFCs and SHSs, our cross-laminated timber structural walls. We have some options for SIP panels. So it is growing, and we're refining that and improving that. Obviously, in the full Nezo package, there's thousands of these assemblies. Right now, I believe there is over 60 available to you in the free tool, which is really good for that early stage when we're working around core structure. Of course, over in the full package, a lot of them more revolve around roofing systems and external wall cladded systems and the like as well. So that is the product inspector where you can look at specification. Here's an introduction to the library. Now, how do you actually use that library? Well, this is where the CAD application comes into the play. So let's jump over to Revit. So what I've done is, cool, I have data. To date, I've been exporting quantities out of CAD files and putting them in Excel, and then I've been going to all those random places to find carbon emissions data and bring it together and run some sort of external calculation. So we've brought the carbon emissions data to where you are working on the application in the CAD software, but now we need to close that loop. We want to run the calculation here too and bring the quantity information from your model, from your design, together with the data to get results. We've already identified we can do it earlier with low levels of detail because we can use those mid-rise assemblies. For instance, this model, perfect example, has CLT floors. We don't need to model any of that floating floor. We can just apply that material that includes the floating floor and get that result. Lower amounts of geometry, earlier results. What I've done here is similar to what you ArchiCAD users would be familiar with this model. All I've needed to do was click here, open up the Revit Nezo application, and from there, click Sync from Revit. And then this screen, which was previously blank, in about 10 to 15 seconds, the model pops up, which is now a data analysis insight model. And we've done the initial material takeoff. So let's expand that so we can see a bit more clear. So this table has populated with all of the materials that it can identify from this model. Now, I will stress this model here is a really good example. It's a really well-modeled core structural model. You don't need to have something to this level of detail. It's great for demonstration because it shows how it can work with complexity. But of course, you can actually work with, I'm going to show SketchUp here because it's really great for the simple geometry. You can work with something that is just ultimately shapes on a page and still get quantity information out that you can associate with that database. But we'll stick with this one for now. Cool. So what I can do is I can go to the material library and I can import materials into the Revit file and place them on the model itself. So that's one pathway of linking data to your design. That's actually useful in the MidRise tool because you have only one project space. It's a good way to save your project. You can actually save the Nezo and MidRise assembly materials directly in your model. Whenever you click sync and the model pops up on screen, you'll instantly get carbon, cost, weight, sequestered carbon, data feedback. And there's no additional mapping step. I'm going to show you guys today the mapping step because I don't want to spend too much time on the workflow, conscious that everyone today watching isn't a designer. But we do cover that in some of the other webinars we work on or we release, and of course in our tutorial videos as well. But that is how we make data usable. So we've made it accessible. It's usable because we can actually import those materials. We're not thinking of data science, of data sheets. Those materials now we're thinking specification, putting them on the model. Okay, so some of the mapping. So this model is interactive. Everyone in construction is a visual person. Ultimately, we see in 3D in our minds and we That's how we understand the data more effectively and more quickly. So if I click anywhere on this model, it actually highlights where the information is on the table. So we've clicked on a wall, it's identified that it's a CLT wall. If I click here, it shows me where else in the model that has actually been used. So there's no debt by spreadsheet scenario here in Excel. It's interactive. We have a graph here that talks to it as well. But currently it's just showing quantities. That's great, but we need to see results. So what we can do here is we'll stick with the walls. We'll go map. And here's the library again, but in this view, we can go structural walls, and we can come down here to the cross-laminated timber walls, and we can choose the appropriate material. Now we do have under here, timber and engineered woods. We would be able to find, or it might be under one of the other options. We can use the search functionality. We'd be able to find the EPDs for the red stag materials that they've released for cross-laminated timber and map directly to that from this brand's carbon only. That's fantastic. We can do that. We have all these materials, so we're never stuck for a product because there's so many in there, but it is just EPD data, so it's only going to give us carbon emissions. If you use the MidRise assembly tools, these are different because these capture other materials. They capture a value in the CLT that we've allowed for carbon emissions associated with SPACs fixings because we're going to have so many screws. If it's the floating floor option, it includes all the carbon emissions with that. And they also include the cost information. You won't get those from the brand's carbon only. So the assembly ones are the ones to use. And then if you can't find something, then defer to the carbon only. But bear in mind that it won't include the cost information. So we're just going to map that material. Do you want to map? Yes, I do. Click confirm. Now we're going to see a change on that dashboard. It was this kind of messy, not mapped list of just generic and default materials that were used by the designer when they were creating the model. I just mapped one material, and all of a sudden we can start to see what we are building here, which is a SOQ. So it's starting to get categorized. We have structural walls, cross-laminated timber, and then we have this material here. There's a bit more information about what's included there. If I click on that, it will tell me what I mapped it previously from. And I can write some notes in there. So these little features, just like this, we're adding all the time. And just improving that workability, intuitiveness in the workflow itself. So I'm going to map another one just to really emphasize how this SOQ starts to form so incredibly fast. So again, we're going to go a meter squared. We can choose meters cubed. We give 2 quantities for every material in the takeoff. You get to choose which one is most appropriate. We're going to go map, and we're going to go for upper floors. And again, we'll just stick with the CLT in this case, rather than adding the floating floor. Makes no difference. And we'll just pick one of these options and click confirm. So now we had structural walls, and now what we're going to see is upper floors. So we're again starting to see that SOQ get built out. Cool thing is this list is getting smaller. That's your QA. This tells you what you haven't yet mapped. So you work down to the end of the list. I'm obviously doing a lot of talking as I'm working through it, but if I'm going gung-ho down through this list, 10, 15 minutes, I got a full cost carbon weight building mass profile of this entire core structure. Up here, we're starting to see dollars form. We're starting to see upfront embodied carbon. This is A1, A3, upfront embodied carbon emissions inside the application. Some of our other packages of Nezo allow for the A4 and A5 in whole of life carbon calculations. But this is the critical stuff we need to know at an earlier stage. It's going to give you the opportunity to make those impactful decisions around sustainability and cost effectiveness. See the sequestered biogenic number there, and we see the weight, which is really important when we're particularly comparing different build options. So that's the mapping process. We work down through our option. We do allow 2 variants. So you can actually create a copy of this and swap out the floor systems for concrete, the wall systems, and just see how different things compare against each other. I'll show an example of that, and I'll show an example of how that looks on one of the library projects that you guys get access to. So we'll jump over here. We'll go back to projects window. So that's from here, projects. We have a number of projects already loaded, and we are adding to this. And in certain cases, you might see, coming soon included, such as this project here. What we'll see in here that you guys have access to, and of course, this is great for the non-CAD users. You can come in and just look at these projects. You, of course, can set up your own projects, that mapping table. Just before I move off, It's not all directly related to the geometry in the model. Of course, if you don't load a model, you're not using CAD, you won't get any takeoff materials here, but you can add manual line items, and then you can link those. So you can put in the quantities from your project and link it directly to that database and use this as kind of an estimating tool in its own right as standalone. So coming back over. So this is what our summary page looks like. So I was down a level. This is what the more detailed page was. That's what I was building out. And you can see more of a finished option here. You see the SOQ. It's interactive. As I said before, it's a bit more impressive now because we have a lot more materials. I can select on one single wall. I can get cost, carbon, weight information from here. And then, of course, it's going to tell me where else that information or where else that material has been used. And from there on the table where it's been highlighted, I click and I can see where else that precast concrete has been used. So that's going to allow us to interactively identify hotspots, what's high on cost, what's high on carbon, and what's high in weight. And we can explore those materials, platform alternatives. And that's where we're going to find our wins. That's where we're going to find the low-hanging fruit. The summary page, you guys get to see two options with your building variants in MidRise tool. So we can have option A versus option B, and we can see how they perform in terms of upfront cost, how they perform, and that will include, it does include labor. If it's precast or CLT, it's going to include for shop drawings, transport to site, and the likes. We're going to see our upfront embodied carbon, A1 to A3, this cradle to gate emissions. Now we can put in some threshold and baseline charts there to see how we're performing against our own targets. And this is a great example. What we can see here is weight difference between different options as well, because this tool isn't going to figure out what impact that has on your foundation systems. But if your superstructure is 75% lighter or 50% lighter, or hell, even 30% lighter, what impact does that make on your foundation? That is really useful information, that an architect can use this tool to create and then go back and talk to the rest of the team and see what impact that would make on cost, what impact that would make on carbon by potentially reducing the mass of the foundation as well. There's a few other different build types that we've loaded in here that you guys can explore. And of course, you can dive down a layer on each one of these. There's usually 3 that we've added for these benchmark libraries. You click the view button, go down a level, explore the information, and this is more relevant to your own projects that you're working, the architects and engineers. You can't develop a PD or produce a PDF report for any of those options you've been exploring for a quick way to substantiate results. That's the high level macro information from this summary: total cost, total carbon, total weight. The team in Nezo, our background is quantity surveying. And, we used to be really proud of, our 300-page bill of quantities that we create. But, experience taught us that quite often the decision maker, the client, wasn't as interested in the entire document as he or she was in page 1, and ultimately they weren't even interested in that. They were interested in the number at the bottom of page 1. So with that in mind, the macro results are the ones that you kind of promote, that you share. That is probably just conscious to leave time for some questions and answers. I might just leave it there unless there's anything else you think is worthwhile bringing up before I sign off.
No, I think you've pretty much covered off as much as you possibly can there in 20-25 minutes. Awesome presentation, so thank you for that. We did get a couple of questions in, not a huge amount, so if anybody has sitting on a question, please just chuck it into the chat or dive into the conversation as well. If you have any questions around the MidRise Wood Construction Programme as well, Rob is still online, so he's happy to answer questions around that as well. First question on, can you just maybe stop sharing your screen there for the moment, and we'll go to larger pictures. Awesome. And I'll turn Rob back on as well. Right, ArchiCAD 28 and 29. Can we use that, or can the software be used with ArchiCAD 28, 29?
Yeah, so ArchiCAD 28 and 29 is in our immediate development plan. We don't have a release date for that just yet. It is probably a few months away. But ultimately, when we do release 28 and 29 for the full version, the users of the MidRise free tool will get access as well. So right now, you can have multiple instances of ArchiCAD if you are a subscriber on your machine. So, continue to work in your 28 and 29 if you've already upgraded, but just have an instance of 27. You can use hot linked models to connect what you're working on in 28 and 29 and open that up in 27. Makes it quite seamless, and then connect through to Nezo to get your results. Yeah. That's the way to approach it for now, and we will update everyone as soon as those versions are released.
Just to explain why 28 and 29 are missing at the moment, ArchiCAD, the integration process is a lot more complicated than the likes of Revit and SketchUp. So it does take us time to move through those, and obviously that comes with a substantial cost as well in moving in those integrations. So we have been working through them. Also, obviously, there's going to be a new 30 coming out fairly shortly, and what our hope is that we get all of them out together. So we're working on that in the background. They will be available within this program duration, just not available right now. Going to keep the chat open just in case there's more coming in. We've just had a question there on saying the promo code doesn't seem to be working. Look, what we'll do, guys, is it should work. It has been working for others. So what we'll do is we'll just double check that after the meeting. And what we'll do is we'll send around a meeting or an email to everybody who attended just with an updated promo code if for some reason it hasn't worked. Just to chuck in a couple of questions there on, just so we keep the conversation going and get a bit more information shared. The more technical questions. So when comparing the likes of timber with concrete or something else, is the application allowing for the fact that there's different installation speeds and different program impacts?
Yes, so there is a level of overhead calculation incorporated into the tool. So when you set up a project, you're going to have a series of drop downs such as to identify what type of building it is in terms of, is this a residential building? Roughly, what is the size of that building? And then when you create your different design options, you will suggest if they're mainly mass timber with CLT floors, or if they're a typical structural steel post and beam. Now, based on those categorizations, we factored for what a typical P&G value would be. So typical of cost planning that you would have on an elemental basis. There's a per square meter P&G rate allowed for. And on the main summary page, in terms of comparing upfront costs side by side, there's a section that accounts for P&G, and that might show lower P&G for methodologies that are proven to be faster. So, for example, SIPS panels or CLT floors will ultimately, on a cube for cube, pound for pound basis, the material is going to be more expensive than maybe concrete. But what you'll see is the speed of installation is significantly increased. Therefore, your time on site is lower. Therefore, your cost of craneage is lower. So we do account for a P&G adjustment in that as well. Put in the inputs to categorize the building.
That's awesome, because that's one of the biggest barriers that we've seen out there is just the lack of data and the lack of experience when pricing out these buildings, being unable to make accurate adjustments to program because it's not a direct like-for-like comparison. You're having to adjust other parts of the budget, and often that there's a level of disconnect with those two things. So it's great that the application is actually providing insight into where those changes actually happen, so that you are accounting accurately to insight level accurately on the difference between the different systems. And just to clarify as well, the pricing and the pricing within the application does account for labor and materials. So it's based on first principle pricing. So it does actually carry all of the information that sits behind that. It's not just a comparison of two materials, it's a comparison of the entire process. Another one for you on, where does the cost and carbon data come from and how accurate is it?
Yeah, so the carbon data, I think, was pretty transparent throughout the demonstration in terms of EPDs generally. Well, actually, in actual fact, all that carbon data is based from EPD, and any MidRise assembly material is just an assembly of those materials, where we then have used first principles methodology to work out the average values for how much concrete, how much timber, how much steel would be in any particular square meter of buildup. And the cost data is the same process. So using combined many decades of experience in cost planning and first principle rate building, we have created those assemblies. All merchant material price data is direct linked through to placemakers. And then for any other supply material, such as timber, for instance, we're collecting that information live from industry, from the likes of Red Stag as a supplier.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. And one last question, just to close it out. Can you explain in just a little bit more detail how that early stage, working with low-level design detail and working with like just shapes, how does that actually capture all of the information that sits behind or would be expected to be sitting behind that when you're just working with shapes?
Yeah, well, we've brought the premise of the process of quantification, and we've kind of pushed it upstream. So as quantity surveyors measuring carbon at the end of a project is kind of ambulance at the bottom of a cliff. scenario. So we've taken that know-how, that experience, and that expertise, pushed it upstream to where the designer is at the earliest stage before the rest of the design team is fully formed and come into place, which is often around preliminary design stage. So really what we've allowed for is effective quantification within a CAD workflow. So when you map a material, we understand, cool, what that material is combined with the description of what is in the Nezo/MidRise library. And we take the quantity from the model. So it's 100 square meters of floor, 50 square meters of wall system. Once you associate that with the library and the material chosen there is a first principles build up behind each one of those. So we know 50 square meters times how much per square meter for brick, for whatever cladding system it is, for concrete. We can compute that then to generate a whole of building result. For the more upgraded versions of Nezo, all of that is completely transparent. We kind of broke the mold on transparency. So we have another system where people create their own materials, but they can actually see how we've built ours, what we've put in there, what EPDs we've chosen. So, and that's visible to many of our users today. So we're pretty transparent about how we've created those. So really, it brings it back to the actual user in app. Is they get to use it as simple as X by Y equals Z. But at any time, they have traceability and transparency about exactly where those numbers came from and how they were generated and what products were chosen.
Awesome. Just because you're still on the call, Robert, I'll throw a question at you. The MidRise Wood Construction Programme is coming to an end, obviously, natural end, coming in June, I think it is. And what happens with all of the IP and all of the likes of our tool and any content that MidRise have produced after that?
Thanks, Barry. It's a very good question. The intent and the process we're working on is that all the IP, all the resources, everything that MidRise has created will be actually transferred over to Timber Unlimited. And although Timber Unlimited had its funding stopped 18 months or 2 years ago, their license for all the Timber Unlimited IP has been taken up by Timber Design Society. And so Timber Design Society now have that in their hands and have a program of continuing to maintain all the Timber Unlimited resource and IP. And so everything that MidRise has done, and all of its public domain, including everything that's on its website, will be effectively transferred over to Timber Unlimited and remain available and remain maintained and updated via the Timber Unlimited ongoing regime.
That's awesome, Robert. That is pretty much it. I'll just summarize or close this out by saying that effectively what this tool is doing is bringing all of the information around mass timber performance from the MidRise Wood Construction Programme back to benchmark information that you can actually read and use. And that's the key thing, is that this data, in its plain form in case studies and things like that, it's great to be able to read this stuff. But what this application does is actually allow you to leverage that information into your own design. So look, I would encourage everybody to go out and download the application. We're on the other side of a phone or a phone call if you do have a question. I will follow up with the promo code. We will test it ourselves internally just after this meeting and make sure that it is working. It should be working. But if it isn't, what we'll do is we'll circulate that promo code again within the next hour or two. Thank you all for attending today. Appreciate your time. Encourage you to use the app. Thank you. And thank you, Robert.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Owen and Barry, and all the participants. Appreciate your time and your input.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks, everyone.